Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a particular pleasure to be here and contribute to this conference, especially in this city and these surroundings. After all, this is a city where banking and much of modern finance was invented. I presume the Florentine bankers did already know in their time of the dangers of lending to the sovereign. But they lived in a time when these kind of disputes were settled with the means that you see in these magnificent paintings around here. Now we have a European Union where we take use different means to settle our disputes. But still, we should be aware of the fact that sovereign lending always has a certain risk. Many historians, and we have a prominent historian here in the audience, have also said that banking was one of the key ingredients of the development of commerce and later industry in Europe. But my main thesis today would actually be that you can have too much of a good thing. Too much banking can actually lead you to problems. And I think that is actually the key issue that is facing the European Union today. Not so much the sovereign debt crisis on which everybody focuses, but much more the banking issue. And let me elaborate on that point a little bit by trying to answer the issue that Elena Caletti put to us. I'm trying to move here my slides. Just a second, please. Doesn't seem to be moving. Voila. Okay, the question which was put to us was what kind of union would we like to have? Austerity union, transfer union, or default union? My answer would be that we don't have the luxury of a choice anymore to a large extent. Events have passed us and all three elements are already around us. And the most we can do is at this point choose what weight to assign in the combinations of these three elements that we already have today, but where we would like to go in the future. Now, I know that it's a popular conception that EMU is now become an austerity union. I beg to differ. That is, I would say, more false than true. In the sense that my view would be that in most cases, the austerity programs were actually imposed by the markets, not by the EU. In case after case, if you go through it, Greece, Ireland, Portugal, Italy last year, it was almost each time the market moved first, and then the European Union came and said, okay, now we help you, but in exchange for that help, you have to impose you have to accept an austerity program, you have to accept structural reforms, and so on and so forth. But I think in a certain sense, the union has been more an implementer of what the markets apparently had asked for. Of course, there can always be discussion of what actually markets want. That nobody knows. All one knows is for certain that the country has difficulties in financing itself. And then you assume that with more austerity and structural reforms, you solve the problem. Now, many people argue today now more austerity will actually worsen the problem. That's open to dispute. But I think the key issue is quite certainly that the EU would never have imposed that much austerity if there hadn't been a problem with market access for these countries. So I would say it's not really about an austerity union, but about financial markets which run away from sovereign debt. Transfer union. Again, we have transfers, massive transfers, not only via the outright support given to Greece, Ireland, Portugal via formal programs, but we have a massive transfer of risk via the balance sheet of the European Central Bank. Everybody knows that everybody knows, at least everybody who is in this business, knows that the European Central Bank's balance sheet has gone up by more than 1,000 billion of euros. And much of this balance sheet now consists of deposits from Northern European banks and lending to Southern European banks. And there's no denying that a certain risk has arisen there, and there has been a transfer of risk both between countries and, of course, from the private sector to the public sector. The risks which German banks formerly had on their books by lending to Spanish, Italian, other banks is now with the ECB. It's now with the public sector, the European public sector. And that means that there has been a massive transfer of risk already taking place. And the only question I think we are facing is how much more? How much more can the ECB bear? How much more of the transfer of risk from the private to the public sector can the balance sheet of the union bear? I think that's one key issue going forward that is still to be resolved. And finally, default union. Okay, we already had a default, so it's no longer a question of whether we have defaults. And actually, we should be honest and say that by signing the Maastricht Treaty, in a certain sense, we signed up to a actually theoretically no transfer, default union, because the only meaning of the no bailout clause can be that if the going gets tough, a country that has difficulties is on its own and could default. That's the logical consequence. We might not like it today, but that's different. Then we should be honest about it and say maybe something should be changed formally as well. But why is there such a phobia towards sovereign default? It has a reason. And the reason is that our financial system is so fragile. And the reason is that actually we have an even higher phobia against defaults in the financial system as well. I have the impression that if our leaders have to choose between a large bank failing and a small country failing, they rather choose the latter. And the reason for that is basically that our financial system is too large. It is both too large, too highly leveraged, and too much intertwined with the sovereign. And we have seen this link between the sovereigns and the banks running both ways. We have seen leveraged institutions like banks holding government debt. The value of that government debt goes down. The capital of the banks or the institutions which hold that debt disappears, and they are in trouble. And we have seen the other way around with unlimited guarantees to the banking system. Ireland and Spain are just the latest example. So that is the issue we are facing today. Basically, we have a very large financial system, and it's intertwined with the sovereigns. And we can't really make up our mind, do we want to accept default left or right or nowhere? And let me just make one side remark here, which is very important to keep in mind. Everybody talks about deleveraging in the European financial system. Let me just assert as a fact, if you compare the middle of 2011 to the year 2008 in terms of the size of the balance sheet of the European banks and the size of their debt level, it has actually increased in between. There has been zero progress in terms of deleveraging in Europe, at least until the middle of last year. And we know that the higher the leverage mountain gets, the worse the problem. The more costly it becomes also to deleverage. So we should really be honest with ourselves in saying that we have done very little in Europe so far to address the real problem, which in my view is in this oversized banking sector. If the ultimate aim is, however, to say, okay, we would like to keep our sovereigns creditworthy and prevent further defaults, then I think the logical institution should be maybe some defaults in the banking sector should be allowed, should be happened. But then we need some institution that makes the system as such stable. So what we have so far is a banking system, a European banking system, which consists of very many national systems, deeply integrated, but no central institution which can actually deal with the default of a large interconnected bank. I think that is the key lacuna in the present institutional system. We have had lots of institutional reform. I'm certain the Commissioner will talk about the six-pack, the fiscal compact, the ESRB, the EBA. But if you think about them, they are designed to prevent future crises. Very good, very important. But we have a crisis at our hands today. We have a debt overhang today. And if you want to deal with that, you need perhaps institutions, but I think institutions without money are useless. We have so far some pots of money with a very thin institution around them, like the EFSF and the ESM. But we have been so far unable to do something for the banks. And if you want to deal with banks in difficulties, you need to have a very large pot of money. And you need to have a very large pot of money which comes from a European source, because any national source will be overwhelmed. And I would say that that is really what we need today, and very urgently. We need an institution that can stabilize our financial markets with union funding. And I think we don't have much time to create such an institution. So my proposal would, of course, be that we take what we have already, the ESM. We must somehow be inventive and allow the ESM to deal with the banks. And I think that is the only way to go forward right now in this particular juncture when we have a crisis at hand today, especially in the banking system. Thank you very much.